All right, today we're diving into something pretty huge from xAI, Grok 1.5v. And let me tell you, this is way more than just another small update. We're talking about giving AI the power to actually see and understand the physical world around us. So let's really unpack what that means. I want you to just think about this for a second. What if an AI could look at the exact same things you're looking at, a chart, a photo, maybe a really complicated diagram, and not just recognize the shapes, but actually get what it means? That's the big question, the real driving force behind what we're talking about today.
Okay, so first things first, what's the big deal? What actually makes this AI so different from everything else out there? And here it is, Grok 1.5v. xAI is calling this their flagship, their first-generation multimodal model. And that's a huge step forward, right? We're talking about building an AI that can genuinely reason about the world we live in.
So what's powering this thing? Get this, a staggering 1.7 trillion parameters. Now, to put that into perspective, that kind of massive scale is what gives the model the raw horsepower it needs to chew through unbelievable amounts of information. It can handle a whole range of really tough tasks, everything from super complex math all the way to looking at a picture and spitting out working code. So let's get into its core skills. For starters, it's not just about text anymore. It can process images, audio, even video. And it combines all of that with some seriously advanced spatial reasoning. That means it can understand how things are positioned and how they relate to each other in the real world. Plus, it's built to constantly learn and get smarter through something called reinforcement learning.
And that brings us to a really key idea here, multimodal AI. The best way to think about it is, well, how do we understand the world? We don't just read, right? We see things, we hear things. We're constantly connecting all these different streams of information. That's exactly what multimodal AI tries to do. Process text, images, and a bunch of other stuff all at the same time to get a much richer, almost human-like grasp on things.
Okay, so the theory sounds amazing, but what about in practice? How does all this actually work in the real world? Let's take a look at how this vision is being put to work. Well, when you put it to the test on benchmarks that are all about real-world understanding, Grok 1.5v doesn't just hold its own. It actually comes out on top. It's outperforming the heavy hitters like GPT-4v and Claude 3. This is basically setting a whole new standard for how well an AI can reason about the physical world. So what does that performance actually look like? Check out this example of its spatial reasoning. You can feed Grok 1.5v a really messy, complex flowchart. And it's not just seeing shapes and arrows. No, it's understanding the logic behind it. And then it can translate that visual mess directly into clean, executable code. I mean, that is a total game changer. And this isn't just theory. The applications are already popping up in really important fields where visual information is everything. Think about healthcare. It can take a complicated medical diagram and explain it in simple terms for a patient. Or in education, it could look at visual materials and build a personalized lesson plan. Even in logistics, it's being used to analyze real-world data to make supply chains more efficient. This stuff is already out there solving real problems. But, with any powerful new tech, there's always the other side of the coin. We have to talk about the tricky part, the constant tug-of-war between innovation and ethics. And this leads to a really fundamental question. When you have an AI that can see and understand our world in this much detail, what are the new risks? What are the new responsibilities we absolutely have to face? It really is a balancing act, isn't it? On one hand, you've got this incredible promise, solving massive problems, making everything more efficient. But on the other hand, you have the danger, and these are serious risks we're talking about, to our privacy, big questions about who consented to their data being used, and of course that ever-present threat of accidentally building our own biases right into the code. So how do we even begin to navigate this? Well, the source material lays out 3 key pillars for responsible AI. First up is transparency and explainability. Basically, we need to be able to understand why the AI is making the decisions it's making. Second, privacy. This one's a no-brainer. Protecting people's data has to be non-negotiable. And finally, human oversight. We have to make sure there's always a person in the loop, someone who can step in and take control. There's this quote from the source material that just hits the nail on the head. It says, "Transparency isn't just a preference anymore, it's a necessity." And that's so true, right? In a world where AI is making decisions that affect real lives, transparency is the absolute bedrock for building any kind of trust.
So, with all these challenges in mind, what's the plan for xAI? Let's get into our final section and take a look at what's coming down the road.
xAI's roadmap is pretty clear. What's happening right now is they're scaling up reinforcement learning like crazy. What's coming up next is implementing something called reinforcement learning with human feedback. You might have heard of it as RLHF. That's basically where people like you and me rate the AI's answers, which helps teach it to be more helpful and, more aligned with what we actually want. And then looking even further into the future, they're exploring completely new ways for us to interact with this stuff.
And here's the key takeaway from all that. The goal is to create this positive feedback loop, a virtuous cycle. Every single time a user interacts with the model and gives feedback, the AI learns a little something. It's a process of constant fine-tuning that's designed to make the AI not just more powerful, but also more in sync with human values and intentions.
And really, that leaves us with one final and I think critical thought to chew on. As an AI's vision of our world gets sharper and sharper, maybe your most important job becomes making sure its values actually line up with ours. Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.